Hi, and thanks for watching my presentation on hip hop's influence on the urban youth's perception of authority. So let's begin. So why did I choose this topic? Well, I chose this topic for three main reasons. The first is personal connection. I'm an individual who's highly interested in hip hop and the lifestyles of rappers, so I thought this would be an interesting topic to further analyze. Second, it's a highly controversial topic that lacks extensive research. It also affects millions with extreme prevalence in the use, and I say this because in 2015, after analyzing over 20 billion songs worldwide, Spotify concluded that hip hop is the most listened to genre in the world today, most commonly being listened to at the ages of 15 to 25. Also, 40% of the total hip hop audience is African American. Here's a graph from Spotify's survey. It's an interactive site, so if you click on it, it'll give you statistics on that region's music music on their music stats. So the background, we're going to turn to the birth of hip hop. So hip hop emerged during an economic paralysis in the mid to late 1970s in New York's South Bronx. So as we saw at the time, youth unemployment levels were at 60% and in some neighborhoods 80%. And black neighborhoods were subject to high levels of gang violence, unemployment, racism, and police brutality. And if you ask anyone involved in hip hop, they'll tell you that hip hop is more than just a musical style, rather a cultural way of life, influencing and involving areas such as ethnicity, art, politics, fashion, and many other countless aspects of the low-income urban life. Many also claim that rap raises the awareness of a marginalized black youth in a language that they can understand. So obviously, hip hop has grown from a long way. So we're going to look at some key terms that I'll talk about throughout my paper and you'll see in this presentation. And these are what my argument are based off. So the first one is gangster rap, which spawned in the 1980s with lyrics. When the lyrical content became anti-authoritative, they were glorifying violence, drugs, and other highly controversial issues in the African American low-income areas. So we define gangster rap as rap with the lyrics explicitly portraying the violence and drug use of the urban gang life and typically expressing hostility towards whites, women, and civil authority. This is the type of hip hop that I'm focusing on throughout my paper. So I'm also focusing on anti-authority, which is the opposition to the illegitimacy of the American judicial system. Another key term that I use in my counter-argument a lot is alternative theory of justice, which is an effort to define social justice in an equitable viewpoint exposing the racial inequality and social injustice in the United States. I also talk about preferred music, which is music that a listener actually enjoys, often because it's relatable to them. And cultural relativism, which is the principle that an individual's person's beliefs and activities should be understood by others in the terms of that individual's own culture. And lastly, social consciousness, which is being aware and conscious of the problems that exist within a community. So the research question, how are rap artists and the hip-hop culture affecting the youth's perception of authority? Is the aggressive and violent style of hip-hop negatively impacting the at-risk youth, specifically ages 15 to 21, in low-income areas? Or is hip-hop expanding the social consciousness of a troubled culture by providing an alternative theory of justice? Ultimately, what are the true effects that hip-hop is having on the minds of its listeners? So after the creation of gangster rap, controversy surrounding hip-hop became very prevalent in the United States. At first, it doesn't appear illogical because the lyrics and images rappers present to the media are notoriously vulgar and harsh. Researchers Gina M. Wingwood and Rolf J. DiClemente expose how the current state of rap is spewing songs filled with violent, raunchy language, misogynistic allusions, sexual innuendos, and sometimes blatant references to lewd sexual acts and suggestive dancing. To the dismay of adults, rap has become the musical choice of some teens. And this comes out of their article, New Research Explores the Effects of Rap Music on Adolescence. Due to the high levels and impact of hip-hop in the youth, this created many to become increasingly concerned. So the problem, many were worrying that the negative messages are influencing the mindset and actions of frequent listeners. So we're going to find out, is hip-hop hindering the youth, and are rappers to blame for most of the negativity in struggling areas? For this, we must take a culturally relative standpoint, which is basically looking at the situation from a standpoint of hip-hop rather than an outside view. And this is the real hip hop, rejection of Paul Butler's theory of justice. Let's Get Free. Researchers analyze how hip hop, music, and culture profoundly influence the attitudes and perceptions about criminal justice in the United States, which goes back to two of the terms we talked about, cultural relativism and a theory of justice, which we'll talk about later. Many say hip hop is an outlet for troubled individuals to empower a generation. So the area of analysis we'll be looking at NWA, who's credited with the birth of gangster rap, and how it affects areas like the South Bronx or other inner city metropolises where hip hop was birthed and where it thrives the most. We're looking at the youth, ages 15 to 21, and how all of this affects their perception of authority. So to begin, we're going to look at the major argument. My major argument is that no correlation exists between hip-hop consumption and the negative anti-authoritative perceptions and behavior by its listeners. And the counter-argument is that the cultural relativism of hip-hop helps create several beneficial outcomes, including serving as an educational outlet, expanding the social consciousness of young African Americans on a relatable and preferred standpoint. So let's look at the influence of crime statistics. Philip Bump writes in his article, as hip-hop becomes more popular, crime drops. So contrary to the popular belief, he compiled research from the FBI in neighborhoods where hip-hop was most popular, specifically violent crime, and from that he concludes violent crime peaked in 1999, the same year as NWA's seminal album. So can we thank Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, and Ren for saving America? Well, no. Crime and music, nearly anyone will tell you, are not linked. Hip-hop culture, such as it is, has nothing to do with the amount of crime in the US or Canada. So, contrary to the popular belief, while many want to point the blame at hip-hop for much of the crime and violence in these areas, research is actually pointing the other way. After analyzing the popularity compared to violent crime in respective neighborhoods, we can also conclude that, as revealed by the literature review, we cannot conclude with any degree of certainty that violent and sexually explicit rap lyrics lead to impressionable youths to antisocial, criminal, and delinquent behavior. Unfortunately, it appears that the present arguments regarding the harmfulness of rap are based on factors other than scholarly analysis. And to the right, we have two graphs that show as rap became more popular, violent crime actually decreased. So there actually is no relation between hip-hop and crime, because as gangster rap became more popular, violent crime decreased. So how is this affecting their perception? So next we're going to look at its influence on perception of authority. So although hip-hop may not be directly causing crime, many skeptics worry that the common vulgar language will in return influence the mindset and perceptions of its listeners. In The Influence of Hip-Hop's Perceptions on Authority, Dr. Aaron Muller and Keegan Bauer conducted a survey measuring hip-hop participants' levels of hip-hop consumption and relating it to their perceptions toward authority. Again, contrary to popular belief, their findings in the study indicated that no correlation exists between hip-hop consumption and perceptions of authority. Individuals with high levels of hip-hop consumption in their study did not necessarily have high levels of anti-authoritative opinions, and vice versa. Similarly, in Thug Life, hip-hop's curious relationship with criminal justice, Andre Douglas Pond examines how hip-hop influenced an entire generation to distrust the entire U.S. criminal justice system. His research concluded that, as respected scholars are arguing today that hip-hop offers a legitimate alternative theory of justice, that hip-hop's bold trespass into traditional copyright and property law is a form of civil disobedience, that hip-hop has influenced a generation of law students and young lawyers to proactively seek radical means of justice, that hip-hop comfortably debates and exposes the dark side of American social inequality, that gangster rappers stake an important place in the black public sphere while still providing seeds of political expression amidst the violence, misogyny, that criminal prosecution of mixtape DJs is an improper use of police power in the ever-changing copyright dynamic, that hip-hop did not create the violent and misogyny rampant within, but merely contextualized it for the black community, and that hip-hop profoundly influences political disclosure. Now, it is a really long quote. Basically, what he's getting at is that hip-hop is just discussing highly controversial topics that the media does not give enough attention, so it may seem absurd at first, but that's because the topics they're discussing are absurd, not the lyrics themselves. So from an outside standpoint, we already see that hip hop is not influencing crime statistics. It's not influencing the perception of authority. Instead, it's serving as a vehicle to educate and empower an oppressed generation. So that leads us into my counter argument, which is taking the cultural relative standpoint of the urban youth, and we're saying that it actually leads to beneficial outcomes. It creates an equitable alternative theory of justice, and musical preference leads to many positive effects on the mind. So let's see what positive effects on the mind hip hop have. So, in a case study from the Western Journal of Nursing Research, 14 participants in 2 separate situations had their brain activity monitored. In one situation, individuals listened to music that they preferred, which goes back to the key term musical preference, and in the other one, they listened to classical relaxation music. So you would assume that the relaxation music would have positive effects on the mind, but surprisingly, their research says there was a significantly greater effect of preferred music intervention compared to the effect of classical relaxation music. The preferred music significantly reduced agitation, while the classical relaxation music did not. So it also, other benefits it has on the mind relate to the positive influences that happen in the brain when listening to music that the listener actually enjoys. Neuroscientist Valerie Salapour reported that music releases dopamine, the feel-good hormone that is activated from pleasurable experiences like food or sex. Music and extract stimulus can arouse feelings of euphoria and craving, going on to claim that dopamine is at its peak emotional arousal during music listening. Hearing certain songs often trigger different areas in the brain and instantly result in mood changes, which will lead to behavioral changes. So, while music has the ability to stimulate the brain, it also depends on the mind of the listener, because so many people have a cultural relative viewpoint to hip hop. That means they have a musical preference to it, and as a result, they're being affected for many positive effects on their brain. So, in conclusion, hip hop is one of the most commonly listened to genres in the world today, with high levels of interest in the youth. In the mid to late 1980s, as hip hop grew into an aggressive, controversial style and began dominating an entire generation, the general public became increasingly concerned about its influence. After analyzing the youth in inner city metropolises where hip hop was born and raised, we conclude that despite popular belief, hip hop shows no correlation to crime statistics. Also, despite popular belief, hip hop shows no correlation to individuals' perceptions of authority in a negative way. In fact, the cultural relativism of hip hop serves as a vehicle to create an alternative theory of justice on the racial inequality and social injustice in America. It increases the social consciousness of an oppressed generation on topics that are hidden in the media. It empowers African Americans and shines a light on serious social issues that the media hides. It also provides preferred and relatable music, which results in several positive reactions in the brain. Thank you for your time.